Hello, everybody. This is Smile the DM here, and today we're going to be talking about de-extinction. Basically, what de-extinction is, um, talk about its uses in our world, and what kind of a potential success story it could actually bring to it. And I want to start by discussing the idea of de-extinction. Where did this come from? Why did we even think of bringing things back from the dead? Well, it all started in in the year of 1991 with a certain author creating a very specific book. And that author's name was Michael Crichton, and his book that would inspire it at all is Jurassic Park. Now, obviously, the main theme of the entire book was for him to warn us about genetic power and its potential in what it could do if we bring something back from the dead. Now, obviously, nobody listens to that whole thing, and Michael Crichton was kind of forced to write this darker version of the book, even though he wanted to make it a lot lighter in tone originally. Um, and basically, all you need to know is then later on, 2 years later, because of the book's popularity, Steven Spielberg and Michael Crichton would work together to ultimately create the film version of the same book.
There it is. Welcome to Jurassic Park.
We've made living biological attractions so astounding that they'll capture the imagination of the entire planet.
The most phenomenal discovery of our time
How'd you do this?
becomes the greatest adventure of all time.
Now, if the book didn't inspire scientists to the idea of de-extinction, the movie definitely did, because the movie was a renowned success. Everyone um kind of looked up into this movie, and even if you're not there for the science, and you're just looking at it from a movie standpoint, Jurassic Park is an incredibly good film. But I'm not here to talk about Jurassic Park. I'm here to talk about de-extinction. So basically, when the movie came out, everyone thought, okay, well, can we actually bring clone things and bring things back from the dead? Well, then 3 years later, you had your very first cloned animal in the form of Dolly the sheep. And basically, what they did to clone Dolly was they took a somatic cell, which is basically they took an egg cell, put in the dead, the DNA of the old, the original Dolly, and put it into this egg cell. And basically, they inserted the egg cell into another sheep, where then you then had Dolly actually become born again. And so now that Dolly was a thing, scientists were like, okay, now that we know how to clone things, can we bring things back from extinction? And in 2002 or 2001, I can't remember what the year was, but I'll put it in. But the Purian ibex was the first to gain this idea of de-extinction. And what happened is the Purian ibex, all you need to know, and I'm going to talk about this briefly here in a second. The Purian ibex was a subspecies of basically mountain goat that lived in the Pyrenees Mountains, which is a mountain range that's in between Spain and France, basically. And in the in this natural park that was there in the mountain range, the last Purian ibex unfortunately passed away due to a tree falling on top of it. So that was kind of upsetting. And so scientists then figured out, okay, we're gonna take blood samples from the last Purian ibex, put that in a stomach cell, and give it to a domesticated goat. And the goat would pop out a Purian ibex, which is the first time scientists ever brought back a de-extinct animal, but unfortunately, like in a matter of an hour, the baby died due to a lung infection. So sadly, you know, we brought the Purian ibex back from the dead, but it didn't last very long. And I'm now going to go further into what the Purian ibex was and how it went to become extinct in the first place. So, like I said, it once lived in the Pyrenees Mountains, which again is a mountain range between Spain and France, and it would migrate throughout this whole mountain range, feeding on various different plant life that was living on top of the mountain and everything like that. So it would maintain the plant ecosystem on the mountain. But unfortunately, the main reason why it became extinct in the first place was due to it being overhunted by not only Europeans, basically it was Europeans that came in and thought that the ibex was competing against their livestock, and in turn, the livestock was actually eating the same vegetation that the Purian ibexes would eat. And so it basically, the Purian ibex went extinct due to not only, for food and for livestock protection of sorts, but it was also outcompeted by that livestock. And so, before I move on, I want to quickly say that I want to talk about this thing called One Health. And you may be asking yourself, what is One Health? Well, the simplest way I could explain One Health to anyone who doesn't know is basically it's this idea that everything is connected, and there are three different connections that that bring the whole Earth together. Not only the environment, its plants and animals, but also the people that live within it. And basically, de-extinction does then become a One Health like idea, because not only do you have to think about what things you're bringing back, but you also have to consider the environment that's currently happening right now as we speak, but then also the people that are in that area. Are they going to leave that animal alone, or we're going to bring it back to extinction again? So, I basically want to present two questions in this video as a whole. And the first question is, can we de-extinct animals? And obviously, we know that answer already. The answer is yes. We have the resources, and we definitely have the technology to do it. But I'm going to quote Ian Malcolm from a certain Jurassic Park film here for the second question.
Yeah, but your scientists were so preoccupied with whether or not they could, they didn't stop to think if they should.
So basically, the second question I'm asking is, should we de-extinct animals? Well, let's explore some examples, shall we? First, and probably biggest one that everyone and their mother's talking about, everyone wants this one back, is the woolly mammoth. Now, the main reason why woolly mammoths went extinct in the first place is due to overhunting by early people. Basically, we drove it into extinction. But not only that, but climate change was another huge factor. And again, I'm going to be talking about climate change here, so just hold on to your horses on this. But climate change has been a thing since the Earth has been turning round, okay? And technically, at this point in time, the ice was just basically melting. So it was becoming more of a heated age at this point. So the Ice Age was ending, and the environment was completely changed to a point where the mammoths basically went extinct. Mostly to climate change. But but definitely overhunting by people also drove them to further extinction. And basically, the main reason why a lot of scientists want to bring woolly mammoths back from extinction is simply this idea of throwing them back into the Siberian wilderness and basically allowing them to deforest the northern reaches. But when you think about it, because the climate change has been steadily rising throughout the years, first of all, the main reason why they went extinct to begin with is already not going to allow them to exist at all in our timeline again. So, sadly, because climate change is like at its all-time high, woolly mammoths aren't going to be brought back unless we drop the temperature to a significant low. Which, of course, nobody wants that, but hey, that's how the only way we're going to bring the woolly mammoth back is if the temperature drops. But unfortunately, due to climate change, that's not going to happen. So if we just bring them back now, climate change is just going to be proven by that fact. On to my second example, and the second biggest one, the dodo bird. Now, dodos, obviously, you already know what they are. They were overhunted by early humans because of how interested they were in humans. Because they were like, ooh, what's this? And they just sadly fell due to that. And basically, due to cats and dogs and rats being introduced to their island, and eating their eggs, the dodo basically went extinct in the 1690s. And the main reason why scientists want to bring back this species in particular is due to a symbiotic relationship with a tamblicola tree. And basically, it's this tree that has a ton of vines all over the base of its trunk. And this symbiotic relationship worked with the dodo eating the fruit of the tree and basically dispersing the tree throughout the island. And due to them going extinct, that tree has also started to slowly decline. Because there's no other animal that disperses its seeds. And this is the main problem why I think the dodo should not come back. Is simply because the tree that scientists say is the main reason why they want to bring the dodo back, it's also slowly going to extinct. There are only a few individual trees that are left on the island. So if at that point you bring back the dodo to help it's not enough to save the tree. So in a way, bringing back the dodo would not necessarily help the tree anymore. So basically the symbiotic relationship, or the relationship that benefits both species, would practically be extinct. So the dodo, I don't think, is also another good idea. Now to the passenger pigeon. Now, obviously, some folks know this story, some don't. But obviously, passenger pigeons spanned all over North America and had this huge, huge migration cloud, so big that it would turn the sky black. That was how many pigeons there were. And so early Europeans basically overhunted these birds because there were so many of them. And basically deforestation in certain areas where the passenger pigeons would lay their eggs and nest there caused the bird to eventually go extinct. with the last individual being dying in the Cincinnati Zoo in 1914. And so the main reason why scientists want to bring back the passenger pigeon is to basically disperse American chestnut trees. And chestnut trees have also slowly declined too, which is pretty fair. That's a fair thing to do, right? However, due to the natural home ranges being so far destroyed, their ecosystem, their original ecosystem is just gone, is replaced by urbanization by humans basically. And so if we were to bring the passenger pigeon back, its normal home range would intermingle with areas they're not used to. And so basically there's been too much deforestation for the species to continue to move on.
Here at the Cincinnati Zoo, we pay homage to her species in our passenger pigeon memorial. My good friend and renowned wildlife artist John Ruthven painted this image of Martha leading a flock of passenger pigeons in front of the original bird aviaries that this building is one of. They were built at the zoo in 1875. He painted the painting in commemoration of the 100th anniversary of the pigeon's extinction in 2014. The disappearance of the passenger pigeon was a wake-up call that led to the passing of the first significant wildlife legislation. Thus, the conservation movement in America began. Wildlife conservation efforts sprang up all over the country, saving species that had been on the same path to extinction as the passenger pigeon.
Now to another big example, the thylacine. Now, the thylacine, if you're not aware, was this marsupial apex predator that lived on the island of Tasmania. And again, basically, they were overhunted by humans and outcompeted by various different invasive species that were introduced, such as foxes and dingoes, to the island. And basically, the thylacine was on the same equivalence as the gray wolf, as the gray wolves we have in North America, where it was overhunted due to them going after sheep and livestock like that. So and of course the last individual being famously filmed and dying in 1936. And so basically the scientists reasonably want to bring back this apex predator into its original ecosystem to balance it out, which again seems like a fair idea. However, there's a good example of us reintroducing an alpha species into an area. And this is where I'm going to talk about the gray wolves in Yellowstone. So, in Yellowstone, gray wolves basically went extinct in that area. They weren't extinct, but they were just gone out of that whole area. And so elk basically became very prevalent in Yellowstone. And with the elk population being left unchecked, they basically ate everything. They pretty much took over the entirety of Yellowstone. And so when the gray wolves were finally reintroduced into Yellowstone, it was very successful at first, because the wolves then started calling off the elk population, so elk would move out of areas where the wolves were, and so the ecosystem in Yellowstone kind of slowly came back. Great, fantastic. However, the wolves again caused problems when they started again going back into farmlands and started eating livestock again. And so now the wolves are slowly getting shot down because damn farmers have to protect their livestock. And this is the sad reality for the gray wolves. The gray wolves helped significantly in the national park, but due to them going into farmlands, it failed. Ultimately, the reintroduction kind of failed because now they're going back and humans are now starting to shoot them again. And I believe it would be the same way with the thylacine. The thylacine initially would, yes, definitely balance out the ecosystem of Tasmania. Unfortunately, due to them like originally going after livestock, I feel like it would happen again. They would go after the livestock, and humans being humans, we would have to defend our livestock. Oh man. And I'm going to continue on with more examples. I got plenty of examples here. So the next one I'm going to be talking about is the gastric brooding frog. Now, interestingly enough, this is another Australian kind of animal in a way. And the unique thing about this frog is the female of the species, as its name would suggest, would basically it can turn off its stomach acid, and its young would live inside of its stomach until they were big enough to then get puked out by the mom, which is a really unique thing for any kind of species. And so basically the main reason they went extinct was due to pollution and deforestation as well, from human side of things. And again, the main reason why we want to bring them back is simply because they can turn off that stomach acid. And if humans can find a way to turn off stomach, like find a way that they can turn off their stomach acid, there's medicinal purposes for having the frog here. Unfortunately, I feel like if we brought back the gastric brooding frog, all its life is gonna know is being stuck in a laboratory just to make, like, just for pharmaceutical needs. And honestly, that's not a good idea for resurrecting a species only for it to be used in medicinal purposes. That's it. Because its environment, again, also is completely destroyed. So there's really nowhere to put these frogs as soon as they're done. Which is the sad reality of what we're dealing with here. So unfortunately, the gastric brooding frog is not a good idea. The Uruks. Now, this European wild species of cattle used to be like everywhere. They used to be everywhere in Europe. And they were a main staple point in ancient Rome, in France. They seem to be like everywhere. And of course, the last of them pretty much died off in 1930 in Poland. And actually, this species is being reversed engineered as we speak. So in Dutch, they have a project called Project Tauros, which is basically to reverse engineer a domesticated cattle and turn it back into the Uruks. And the main point of bringing the Uruks back is to maintain the ecosystem in Europe. And again, like with the passenger pigeon, I feel like because there's too much urbanization, there's too much deforestation of European countries, its normal home range where it used to be, where it was in Italy, and it was in France, and it was in that German kind of Polish kind of area. I think it's too urbanized for it to make a comeback and actually make a dam in its area. But again, scientists are currently working on bringing this species back. So only time will tell if this one actually is worth bringing back. Now, to a recent extinction, and this happened in 2009, sadly. The Beijing, or as I like to call it, the Chinese river dolphin. Now, this species of dolphin basically was the true river dolphin. It lived in a particularly large Chinese river. And unfortunately, they went extinct due to the urbanization that has been happening in China and the pollution that has been slowly integrated into its environment. And in 2001 there was an attempt to preserve it and like actually study this species, but at that point it was already too late. It was already done. Like, damage had already been done to the dolphin. And honestly, the only reason why scientists are bringing this species back in particular is due to it filling an ecological niche in the river and having a very spiritual significance to the Chinese people in the river, because it was basically a mythological creature to the Chinese people. But the problem is, China is still a developing country as we speak. So China is still doing what they're doing, and the river is, as far as I'm aware, is still very polluted. So unless these two things are like, so unless China slows its urbanization and pollution is being cleaned up in that particular river, the dolphin has no chance of like then coming back properly. There is no proper way of bringing this species back. Now the quagga. The quagga is an interesting species. It's basically half horse, half zebra kind of looking thing, but it used to live in the grasslands of Africa for a time, and of course there's been tons of projects also resurrecting this species, and some claiming that the species has already come back and came back. And the main reason why the quagga is being reintroduced into parts of Africa is to help diversify plant species, again, with the dodo and its symbiotic relationship. So basically, the quagga is being used as seed dispersal again. But the sad reality is that Africa as a whole is then slowly becoming a developing continent. Basically, every country in Africa is slowly starting to urbanize. And what's happening here is that the grasslands are slowly getting lost due to this urbanization. And so if you did bring back the quagga, the quagga is not going to have a lot of things to eat, and there's not a whole lot of habitat that it's going to live in. So it might fill that ecological niche, but again, urbanization has basically destroyed its original environment. Now, the Mike Clear's rat. Now, there's going to be a lot of flack from me because everyone in the comments is going to be like, ew, a rat? What is that? But let me explain. So, the Mike Clear's rat basically was a rat species that lived on Christmas Island. Yes, that's a thing. And Christmas Island is in the Indian Ocean. And basically, these rats were in charge of maintaining the population of Christmas Island crabs on there. But when European settlers came in just to study the island, again, the rats were very, very friendly towards the European settlers. But surprisingly, the Europeans didn't overhunt them. Instead, the way that they went extinct was due to the introduction of European black rats, which basically carried diseases that the Maclear's rat were not able to be immune from, and so they basically went extinct due to just not getting used to a certain disease. And the main reason why scientists want to bring back this rat species in particular is due to their aid in basically maintaining the Christmas Island crab population, which has basically skyrocketed over the years. However, I feel like that's a little unnecessary due to, again, the black rats still being there, and basically an invasive ant. Yes, you heard me right. An invasive species of ant being introduced to the island that's basically already taking care of a good number of the Christmas Island crab population. So it's already the island has balanced itself out to where if you introduce the Mute-Clear's rat, there might then be a large decline of Christmas Island crabs, which would then be a concern for the crab and not the rat. And if we're going to be honest here, a lot more people are going to care about a crab than they are going to care more about a rat. So, not necessarily a good idea, but I can definitely see this one being a good one, a good candidate for bringing back. But since it's already been balanced out, I don't think it's necessarily a good idea. And I'm going to talk about one more example here. That being of the great ook. Now, if you don't know about the great ook, it's basically a giant kind of penguin that lived right around, like, all along the coastal areas, mainly in particular Europe. And basically, they went extinct due to overhunting, and surprisingly enough, a lot of museum collections. And what I mean by that is a lot of museums knew that the great ook was going extinct because it was getting overhunted. So instead of doing anything to take care of the species that's still alive and still, swimming around and everything like that, they decide to take eggs, like eggs straight from their nest, to then preserve them in museum collections. And from humans basically then collecting eggs of the great ook, that's where it pushed it over the limit, and that's when the species became extinct. And the main reason why the great ook is going to be brought back is due to it somewhat having an idea where, because razorbills and puffins, which are, again, two different species of birds, are struggling to find food in their ecosystems currently. And so scientists believe that by bringing back the great ook, it would balance out the ecosystem and then everyone will be happy and dandy. Unfortunately, first of all, climate change has significantly impacted our oceans and the original environment the great ook used to be in. And so if you were to say, want to bring back the great ook, again, like with the woolly mammoth, you can't do that because it's already too hot for the great ook to come back. Secondly, what do you mean by balancing out the environment by introducing another species that eats on the same things that these two species also feed upon? Like, does that make sense to add more competition to two species that are already struggling to, still be in existence? So, I don't think, honestly, the great ook is a great idea, at least for now. If you want to add another competitive species that has already been extinct for hundreds of years, so be it. But it doesn't sound like a great idea at the moment. So, basically, to answer the second question, should we bring back extinct species? No. And why is that? It's because, well, first of all, we can't bring back things with amber and insects that are in there, because that don't work. A lot of the idea is to then put these extinct animals into a Pleistocene kind of park, which already seems ethnically wrong to do so, because the main reason why we have zoos to begin with is to save species that are currently going extinct in the wild now, and already a lot of people have problems with modern zoos. So what would then be the potential in a Pleistocene zoo that is only getting criticized because we just brought him back because we could? It makes no sense. But other than those few factors, there's climate change, which has been steadily rising over the years. There is deforestation and urbanization due to more and more people being on this planet. And sure, reintroductions have been a thing for large mammal-like carnivores, but ultimately they fail in the end because they go immediately back to an easier resource to hunt. However, despite all of these claims, despite me saying no to a lot of all these species, there is one species that could potentially come back, and I see no issue with that. And that is with the Purian ibex. And interestingly enough, in August of 2019, Iberian ibexes, which is another subspecies that's a living relative of the Purian ibex. These ibexes were then Iberian ibexes were then returned to the Pyrenees Mountains, and once there, the ibexes then slowly just started restoring the entire ecosystem of the mountain, eating all the plant life. And what's surprising about this is that even villagers from the farmlands and everything like that gathered around to see the Iberian ibexes walking across the mountain, and they even believed that they were the Purian ibexes. Which, don't get me wrong, Iberian ibexes and Purian ibexes look stupidly similar. They're incredibly similar, and if you put the two of them next to each other, you couldn't tell the difference between both species. And so I believe that bringing back the Purian ibex would, yes, impact everything, and it would fix a lot of the problems in the Pyrenees Mountains. If we could introduce a different subspecies and it has a better effect, why not bring back the original species to do its exact same job? I think that would be a really unique idea for the Purian ibex to be running across the mountains again and actually doing what it needs to do, if that is the case for the Iberian ibex. And so, what I'm going to conclude with today is de-extinction, yes, it's a possibility. And yes, there is a lot of potential good in bringing back extinct animals. Unfortunately, we're looking at animals that are, well, too specialized, too, popular. We're looking at all the popular extinct animals and going, can we bring that back? And the answer to all of that is simply no. But if you look at lesser extinct animals like the Purian ibex, which has already been de-extinct once, there's a potential for bringing that species back. And if we fixed our planet to a point where the climate has dropped significantly in temperature, basically we allow certain areas to just regrow back and grow more natural and keep more natural areas protected, and add further protection to at least reintroducing carnivorous species into a particular area, I think de-extinction could work. I think it should be a good idea. But as we currently have it on our planet right now, de-extinction is not a good idea. Honestly, what we need to do is save the species that we've already got. Because we're already in our 5th mass extinction. Currently, as we speak, we're going through a mass extinction. And the main cause of that is basically humans. And if we could fix the mistakes that could potentially lose the extinct species that we want to bring back, then maybe we'll have a fighting chance to save natural species that are still living as we speak, as we're still talking. There are still animals out there that are struggling to survive. And if we have any chance in bringing back any extinct animal, honestly, let's save what we have now before we could even bring up the possibility of bringing back extinct animals. And that basically is going to conclude it for today. I don't mean to end it on such a depressing note, but I wanted to talk about this topic because, extinct animals, are interesting to me. I love talking about them. But we also have to understand, we have to look back at the history of why they went extinct and then look at it currently now. And I leave you basically on a final note where if we want extinct animals to come back, let's first look at what we have now and fix the problems that we have now before even looking into the past and bringing the past back to the present.